Hello, one and all, and welcome to one could either say a divine or a bit of a gamble variation of the Brewing Labs. Now, for this episode, we're actually going to be having our brewed around one specific card that's a bit of a controversy, one could say. Divine Gambit. 2 white, 4 sorcery, exile target artifact, creature, or enchantment and opponent controls. That player then may put a permanent card from their hand onto the battlefield. Now, the reason why I decided to make a deck brewed around this card is a little bit of an interesting short story. To put a long story short, essentially, with Strixhaven coming around the corner, they actually have a new fiend coming into Strixhaven, which is the Mystical Archive. And the Mystical Archive essentially is a mini set that you can actually get cards from when you open your packs at Strixhaven and such, whether through Arena booster packs or through draft and such. And basically, the Mystical Archive is a collection of spells throughout Magic history of the instant or sorcery variety. There's some powerful ones like Sword to Plowshares, Diabolic Tutor, Grape Shot, Tendrils of Agony. I can go on. There's actually some pretty saucy spells, even some classic ones that from last year's standard like Growth Spiral. But there was some weird ones as well, like for example Divine Gambit, and even some stuff they would usually only use in Limited. By the way, that was kind of intentionally designed so you can actually have it better in Limited for your limited archetypes. Just something to keep in mind. And one thing that people kind of made the joke about, it's like, long story short, his pretty much Swords to Plowshares got banned in Historic, and a lot of people were kind of making a complaint that's like, oh, we can't get this really powerful 1-mana interaction, and this is the best thing we got for right removal. You know, a little bit of discourse around that, some people just joking around with it. And I'm actually going to be here to kind of like make a argument that you can actually use Divine Gambit in Constructed a lot more better than you would think at first glance. Now, is it better than Swords to Plowshares? No. Is it better than some of the exile removal that we're going to be getting in Strixhaven? Not even close. I mean, had you seen Vanishing Verse? Vanishing Verse, way better. Okay, but I do think there is actually some argument of how you can actually use Divine Gambit if you pull it in your Limited and you wanted to actually try to play it in Constructed. And that's what this Mardu Control deck is, the basic gist of it. Because the thing is with Divine Gambit, the main power of the card is that you don't really want to treat Divine Gambit as a 2-drop spell. As you probably noticed, it looks like our 2-drops are very heavily. I usually like to treat Divine Gambit as either a 4 to sometimes 5 or even 6 cost spell. And the main reason why is because in a Sorcery Speed controlled deck, Divine Gambit can actually be very useful because, sure, your opponent gets a free Feign, but the thing is they lose the tempo of the Feign they played for free. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say, for example, you're on turn 5, your opponent decides to play their thing, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to remove it with Divine Gambit, which can target a lot of Feigns, can target artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. That's very powerful. But then your opponent is like a ramp deck, and they were really cheeky, and they're like, oh, thank you for the free Ugin. And then you're like, sure, okay, let's just banish him, right it. Oh, hey, let's murder his writer it. Or they play a big creature, hey, let's make you sack it, or sack it in exchange of the other creature you have there, or board wipe and such. You kind of get what I'm saying here. The way I look at Divine Gambit, it's just a way to essentially bring something that you're inevitably going to try to remove in the future, just bring it out a lot faster so you can actually respond to it a lot quicker and help keep control of the battlefield. And that's what this Mardu Control deck is going to show off. So, for the list, we have 3 Blood Chiefs first, 1 Blood Beckoning, mostly to return some of our powerful ETB creatures, as well as Valky, more or less, aka Tybalt. In our 2 drops, we have the Birth of Meletis, just to get some lands for ramp, as well as to get a little artifact creature wall, which is nice, and gaining 2 life. Very nice. We have the Card of the Shell. We also have Elderfane Disciple. Nice card to help us make our opponents discard, because one other benefit of Divine Gambit is if your opponent's kind of empty-handed, then this spell does kind of become unconditional removal, so something to keep in mind. We also have Valky as another way for our opponent to discard in quotation marks, though a majority of the time we are wanting to use it for a Tybalt Cosmic Imposter because that card's silly. We also throw through 2 Kroxa Titan Depth's Hunger in the list, mostly just good discard, as well as allows us to use our graveyard later down the line to make a big creature that constantly makes our opponent discard stuff. We also throw in 2 Banishing Light, just as a way that if our opponent uses Divine Gambit to play like a Planeswalker or play like a permanent that we don't have an answer to automatically, Banishing Light pretty much can target any non-land permanent, so like that. We throw in a few Murderous Rider, mostly just as a way to destroy any early game creatures or mid-range planeswalkers. Necromancer is mostly in here as a one-off just to answer specific combo decks or specific pieces that we can't answer. Like, you could even make an argument to go 2-2, like 2 Murderous Rider and 2 Necromancer, but I kind of decided to go with the free one. I'll explain later why in a minute. But Necromancer is mostly in here just to name either Zenith Flare, or to name essentially Genesis or Emergent Ultimatum, since we really have a hard time answering those pretty much if they get cast. We also throw in a few Mythos of Snapdats, really great, especially since we do have Turgid in this list, making our opponents forced to sack something that they probably don't want, which then benefits our Turgid. And sometimes this is just a really nifty control tool against like wide token decks, essentially, which is popular in the format if you've seen the Naya tokens list going about. We also have Skull Raid in here as just future discard, but also works as future draw as well, since if our opponent is empty-handed, we draw 2 cards from it, or we can just make our opponent discard their last card and draw a card from it. We also throw in Liliana, Waker of the Dead, as a one-of in the list, mostly just to encourage our opponent to discard, use as target removal if necessary. And of course, if we get to the ultimate, it gets really silly, especially since we have ETB triggers such as repeating Kroxa from the graveyard and such to make our opponent discard, or even just returning an Elderfane Disciple or Turgid is very, very nice. We also have Doomscar in here as one of our other board wipes, just that way we can just foretell it, and then just use it as a board wipe for later. Of course, Turgid, as well as Turgid's Lanterns in the deck, because it allows us to essentially remove our resources from our opponent, as well as potentially steal our opponent's resources if they discard it or sacrifice it, which is very nice. Plus, Turgid Lantern, once you get to the point where your opponent has low resources, just activating this constantly will make the opponent in a very, very compromised position. Then we have Kaya the Inexorable. This is kind of the reason why I decided to go with the 3-in-1 with the Necromentia and Murderous Rider, since I wanted to try to keep a fair amount of creatures within the deck design. That way then we could plus, if we need to, +1 on Kaya. We could do the +1, put it on like a Murderous Rider, or put it on like a Valky that's just holding on a creature. Maybe even a Kroxa or a Turgid and such, just to semi-protect them if they get removed or exiled. But primary, we do have Kaya in here just for the -3. Exile target non-land permanent. Consider this kind of like the 4th Divine Gambit that doesn't have to make our opponent play a permanent, more or less. And of course, if we get to the ultimate, it's completely absurd, because we could just like replay Kroxa, we could maybe even replay a Valky, or even a Tybalt. Very absurd. And then for our ending curve, we have 2 Blood on the Snow, mostly just a way to deal with either wide creature base or wide Planeswalker Super Friends base. And if we can actually return a good permanent from our graveyard to the battlefield, whether it's one of our Planeswalkers or one of our creatures. And then, of course, 1 Ruinous Ultimatum, just because if we need to, if we're going against a control matchup, this is just a relatively good answer to answer everything that's on their board. And not have any of our stuff get removed, mind you. Now, as for the lands, we have 6 snow-covered plains, 1 castle lock frame, 5 snow-covered swamps, 1 snow-covered mountain, we have 3 snowfield sinkhole, 2 sulphurous mire, 3 Savai Triomes, 1 Crawling Barrens. Obviously, this is in here because having a manland that we could sink in and be able to use as a quote-unquote manland to use that gets bigger and bigger and use for potentially a finisher. Very nice. And 2 Fabled Passages to help us filter out for a land if we can't find any. Now, you might be wondering why I didn't put the Pathway cycle in here, or any of the Temple cycle. And the primary reason is because I do want to use Blood on the Snow's ability, and the majority of our permanents are within the 5 to 4 range, so I want to make sure we get the accumulate as much snow as we need to be able to effectively use it and return something. If you don't use Blood on the Snow, or don't use a snow-based package, you could definitely go with the Pathway land cycles and the Temple cycles, I would say. So, If you want to tweak a variation of that deck to not include that, go right ahead. Nevertheless, though, that is the deck. We're going to play a few of Best of One and just show off how the deck works, and make a case for the Divine of the Gambit. Okay, our first opponent. Okie dokie. Let's see what shenanigans they're providing for tonight. Okay, so let's take a look at our hand. Our hand, 4 lands. Birth of Melchizedek is very nice. Valky is very nice. Kaya is also very nice. It's a greedy hand, especially if our opponent is a discard deck themselves. We don't know yet. It also could potentially be a little bit slow, so we gotta be cautious of that, but I think it's a keep. Mostly because we could play this turn 1, we could play the Birth of Melchizedek, go get another Plains, then play that Plains if we need to, or if we need to, later down the line, we could play the Crawling Barrens to have a land to protect us, play the Kaya to hopefully remove their biggest thing, and hopefully we can draw into more stuff, so. It's a bit of a greedy keep to an extent, but I think it's worth a shot. Now let's talk our opponent. It's a more slower deck. The only thing that's going to hit us is if they have an Agonizing Remorse, so let's hope this is more just an indication of them being Sultai Rogues than an indication of them being Gritzes or Demir Discard. But chances are they're just Rogues. Yep. Some things are very consistent in this world. Now, I had a choice of either playing the Valky or the Birth of Melchizedek. I would rather get the land here just so that we got it. And mostly that way then we can just ramp up to the typical Cosmic Imposter and such. Nevertheless, what we're probably going to be doing here is holding up the Murderous Rider until they try to cast one of their other rogues, most likely, since we only have 2 cards in discard at the moment. So yeah, we're going to play this. We're going to just pass the turn. They're probably going to flash in like Thieves Guild Enforcer or something like that. They did not. Well, they're definitely holding up their counter magic then. There is an argument to try to just hit the Murderous Rider now. Try to feed the counter magic. That way the next turn. This is an interesting choice here. Yeah, I think I'm going to try to do it now. Because they're at 2 cards, they can't drown in the lock, so they have to do like a free cost counter spell and such, like you didn't say please or stuff like that. So essentially we're forcing the opponent to counter it now. There we go. That way they only have 1 black mana, and hey, Kroza's in our graveyard. Another matchup where Kroza is very, very good. But the primary reason why we did this is because now we can use Valky to look at their hand. And take out any problematic. Okay, they're more just the in-the-mill plan. Okay, that's good to know. In that case, we're going to play this as a land here. They're probably going to just murder the thing, but it's nice to see this because now we know they don't have counter magic. That's good for us. Okay, so they decide to murder. Okay, so really the only thing that kind of hits us here is, are they going to do this, is the question. Or are they going to wait till they kick? Okay, we're at a risk here. We could try to play the Kaya and hope that this is not a drown in the lock. We could also theoretically do the safer play, which is technically just play this Kroza. But the problem is we don't have the second mountain or swamp, so we can't really do that, so I think the play here is play Kaya and just hope that wasn't a drown in the lock. Okay, that wasn't a drown in the lock. That's good. Exile this. So we're in the clear for a teeny bit. But yeah, probably here they're going to Maddening Cacophony, make us mill half our library. Okay. We're just going to put Spirit Counter on this. Non-token creature, you silly. Though for the future, actually that's good food for thought for them. Let's see if we have any planes left in the deck. do. Surprisingly. Okay, so the problem is we do have to keep in mind that our opponent has a murder. Really what we need now is just a second mountain or swamp. I'm gonna do this again because if we can get this to the ultimate, then we are in a good position. And then if our opponent tries to flash in with a rogue, we can just cast the Murderous Rider. But we are in a bit of a pickle. Okay, opponent doesn't do anything, so we're just going to put some counters on this, not make it a creature, so it doesn't get targeted by the friend of the murder there. I got an idea. Nah, shouldn't be too greedy with this. My thought process here was being just to make this into a creature, and then we can actually put the ghost form counter on it to return it back to our hand if necessary. Or play the Murderous Rider and do the same thing, but I feel like we really need to hold on the Murderous Rider when they inevitably draw, like, their rogue and such that they're going to try to cast. Our opponent has something, which granted it could just be the murder to potentially have the target on the walls. There's the thing I was thinking they were going to have. We'll let them do the initial mill, but we're going to say bye-bye to the Thieves Guild Enforcer. See if they have the second. Did they say please? They did not. So we will mill the initial free. Really just need a second swamp or a second mountain or triumph. Fabled Passage might also work, depending on if we didn't know we milled the mountain. So yeah, we really just need either one of the dual lands. Okay, that actually is perfect. So we're going to force our opponent to discard, but they might just murder the Elder Fane Disciple in response. They decided not to. Fascinating. Okay, so in that case, what we're going to do here is play the murder. Put a Ghost Form counter on this. Play this. Just put some counters on it, since most of our stuff is sorcery speed at the moment. Okay. Actually, first things first. Decline. Now we will make the creature. I want to put the ghost counter on this, just to be safe, so if it ever gets removed. We might be just in the case where we're winning with the Crawling Barrens here. Well. Yep. We didn't even have the ultimate to Kaya. Okay, first win with the Mardu Control deck. Very nice. Very nice. And even got to platinum with it. Splendid around it to the pepper around it. Okie dokie. Let's play another round. This one is weird. Let me take a look at our opponents. They're a 50 free card deck. I really wish for a mountain here, but I think this is a keep. Because we can Valky at the very least and see what our opponent's doing. But if the squirrels have any indication, I'm going to guess some tokens, and I'm going to guess some squirrels. Yeah, this is probably mono green stomping. Lucky enough, we do got the board wipe to cast later. Oh yeah, it's absolutely mono green stomping. In this case, I'm actually going to steal the troll from them. Mostly because I'm curious about a weird interaction here. Now, realistically, I probably... Well, no, getting the Yorhold would actually have been a horrible idea. Well, if they draw land, they can play the Question Beast, but... My experimental brain, as part of the Brewing Labs, wants to do this experiment. Which is, when we change this into this, we're not going to attack in. We're going to expect it to die, to be honest. I'm wondering what happens here. So we block. Do we get the aura, or do they get the aura? This is where I'm curious about to see. Okay, so the aura doesn't happen whatsoever. Okay, fascinating. Good to know. Anyway, we are going to have to make them discard here. Mostly get out most of their stompy stuff. We probably are in a position of being dead. But okay, so Valky doesn't get the death trigger or anything. That's all I really needed to know there. That was an experiment. Well, they're probably going to keep their Yorval, if I have to make a guess. Wait, what? But you've got to get the Yorval and the what? The what? That was a little bit of a misplay from our opponent. Okay, speaking of which, now time to show... Well, actually, we have 3 cards in our graveyard.
This battle is going to end.
And this is the case of me
terms.
forgetting about Scavenging Ooze's activated ability, so we might have put ourselves in a death position. We should have probably realistically just Divine Gambit the Ooze here, which actually would have actually shown off Scavenging Ooze upon post reflection. And yeah, the opponent might just make this into a 6. Yep. Okay, this play on my part, actually I could have just removed it with Divine Gambit and actually been in better position there, so got greedy with the Planeswalker, so that was a bit of a brain fart on my part. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba. Anyway, on to the last game of the night. Okie dokie. Well, we got all of our feature cards, with the exception of Blood Beckoning, so I think we give this a shot. We're on the play, so we can play these tap lands out first. Actually, probably better to play the Birthing Melodist here to go get a plane. Get a little bit of ramp. Let's see, our opponent's playing blue and mono blue, or is there a second color in this? Maybe even 3 colors. Let's see what our opponent's doing. Blue, red, so team of giants. Okay, we might be in trouble. Like, not like the biggest trouble in the world, but that is a bit of a one to be cautious about, let's just say. So they're probably going to reveal like a Bone Crusher Giant. And then we get dealt 2 points of damage. No, a Tectonic Giant. Ooh, that's a Crystalline Giant. I think this is one of those times where we just sandbag just a little bit. Because the thing is, we could Divine Gambit and try to get out their biggest thing. Actually, that might be the play there. Get out their biggest thing. That way, then they think they're clever and they play their Tectonic Giant. Then we can just board wipe. So, actually, yeah, I think that's the play here. So they get out their biggest giant that they have. Maybe it's just a Tectonic Giant, which they'll just get an impulse draw or deal damage to us 1 turn. But knowing this deck, they probably want to bring out something really big. They're thinking about it. Yep, that is a very big giant. Lucky enough, we can block it. So they decide to glimpse the Cosmos. So we could actually save our board wipe here and just blood cheese first this Calamity Bearer. So yeah, we're gonna block here. How the Doomscar actually looks pretty nice. Yeah, let's Doomscar. Then we're just going to play this. We're going to foretell this. And that's kind of like the show Divine Gambit there. It's kind of like if you play with it and know kind of like how your deck works, you can actually play with the card a lot better than people take at first glance. Yes, it's not 1-in-1 removal, but if you kind of like know how your deck functions, you can play with Divine Gambit to make it where it makes your later game control spells a lot more effective, aka wraps, unconditional removal, etc., etc. So our opponent's going to discard 2 cards of their specific choice. Both Tectonic Giants. Okay. Now we're in a weird choice here. We could either play the Divine Triome. I think what I'm going to have here is we might just cycle this. Yeah, let's cycle. There's another board wipe that will come in handy. I think I might just play the board wipe now because this has that ability that when it gets target, it does the impulse draw. And it would probably be just better if we don't give them the impulse draw. I guess we're giving them the impulse draw. So they're probably either going to do the impulse draw if I have to make a guess. Yep, there's the impulse draw. They're going to play a land from it. We're going to play a land. Lucky enough, we do have our late game cards like Tybalt stuff and Kaya, so we're not in a pickle just yet. Though we are probably in the circumstances where we are probably going to... That's a nice draw. Yeah, I think we're just going to draw here, see if we can get a unconditional. Okay, that's nice. Okay, that's really nice. We're going to pass the turn to our opponent. They're probably going to peen us for 2 points of damage. That they do. Do they play a giant out, is the question of the day. Nah, they're just going to do some more ramping, it seems. Giant? Giant. Giant goes bye-bye. So we're gonna play this. So really the thing that we can hope here is that they try to play out a lot of giants. That way then this Mythos of Snapdance becomes very effective. No, they're just going for the board wipe approach. Makes sense. In that case, we're just going to draw, just so that we can draw more cards and dig deeper into our deck. Just to make sure we get answers and stuff to their stuff. Are they going to? No. Okay, so now we can just discard the last card in their hand. It's probably a Bone Crusher, and they're probably just going to stomp. Some things you know by clockwork. Well, on the bright side now, we can actually just use this Blood Beckoning. Play this again, just so that we have a blocker. How does this work? So they can scry 3. We gotta keep that in mind. Well, they're first gonna draw, and then they're going to scry. They like 2 cards on the top, so that's a bit of a concern. They're probably going to fetch the card that they scryed on top, if I have to make a guess. Yeah, we got to draw here, even though we're losing 2 life. It's a little bit sketchy at this life total. Okay, that was a good draw. We're going to say nope to this. We are going to shuffle our library bed and fetch a land. Excuse me. We already got the second. We're pretty much good for... I'll probably just get the planes here, because no matter what, we're good for our... We're good for our ultimatum. We're good for a variety of things. But probably the chances are what our opponent's going to do is cast their big giant here to do some drawing, essentially. They're gonna put down the little giant. They're gonna put down that. Okay, now we're in trouble. White Greener is a bit of a problematic card for us, because the thing is, no matter what, if they have a giant on the battlefield, at the beginning of their upkeep, they are going to deal 2 damage to us, so... And we're not at a really good life total, one could make the argument. I think we still have to draw, and hope we draw into like an exile spell. Well, speaking of which... Case for Divine Gambit, y'all! Okay, let's see what they get here. Board wipe. Fair enough. That means we do get dealt 2 damage to the face, which is not great. But we're not dead yet, at the very least. If there's one consideration I would probably put in this deck is I might consider Erebos' intervention, especially with how much we pee in our own life with some of our spells. Yeah, we're just going to do... Putting us at the 2 life range is going to be risky. How many giants did they play in Bone Crusher? They only played 1. So, if they have a stomp, we're dead. I mean, guess we play to our ounce. It's a good game to our opponent. And let's see what we would have drawn. But done. And that is Divine Gambit. Anyway, that is Mardu Gambit Control. Now, like I said, there's a few ways you could tweak this deck. Like, one thing I was considering is that you could throw in either a little bit more discard, or you can throw in stuff like Erebos' Intervention to help you with essentially needing to gain life, since there is a lot of life loss with this deck design, so that's something to consider. You could also consider, as well, since we're talking about the interventions, you could definitely also consider Heliod's Intervention as just a quick way to gain a ton of life, as well as destroy problematic artifacts and equipment. That's another consideration for the deck design. Also, other things that you can consider for the deck is additional discard spells, mostly like, you could go pretty much a variety of realms. You could either go cheap Duresses, you could also go with Acquisitions Expert along with the Outer Fane Disciple. Elspeth's Nightmare is a constant classic one that a lot of people like to play, essentially because it allows the Graveyard Exile ability on its final stage. Also, Inscription Ruin's not bad as a 1 or 2 of, I would say. Also, maybe some more Lilianas, maybe some Rankles. You could definitely do a lot for the discard package. I would say also one type of deck you could probably play Divine Gambit in relatively well is like the Doom Foretold list that you usually see going around. Mostly because being able to at least fish something out of their hand that they're inevitably going to have to sack to Doom Foretold is actually not bad. It also helps with the future discard. So that's definitely another list that I was considering to tweak for this list, but I do like Mardu Control, so kind of want to show off the Mardu Control shenanigans and how they can benefit with Divine Gambit. One thing I would say, though, with Divine Gambit, I would mostly only the reason why I have it as a free of for this is just to kind of like make sure that it can show play within our following gameplay footage tonight to just prove my point kind of scenario. I would say, though, if you are actually brewing around Divine Gambit in a control list like this, I would usually keep it as a 2 of. Because while it is great mid to late game, never great early game, so it's probably good to just keep it as a 2 of and then put in some more control magic of some sorts. But for tonight, I just wanted to throw free in just to show what plays you can actually do with Divine Gambit that actually can be beneficial within a constructed format. Nevertheless, that is this episode of the Brewing Labs. If you liked what you see, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you think there's other saucy shenanigans that can be applied to this deck design. Nevertheless, I hope you all have a lovely night. This is LevDev, signing out. Bada beep, bada boop.